Routinely when we're here, we speak about liberty. Liberty is in our name. But tonight we're going to talk about one of the other unalienable rights endowed by our Creator, and that's life. Ed Ternan and I went to school together too long ago at Santa Clara, and we've been good friends ever since. If you meet Ed, you understand why it's easy to be a friend of his. In May of 2020, when we were just beginning the throngs of COVID and locked in our houses, I saw a story about a senior at Santa Clara University who died from a fentanyl overdose. And that student's name was Charlie Ternan, Ed's son. It's hard for a parent to see your child hurt or suffer. But I can't imagine the agony of what it's like to outlive your child. The responsibility of a parent is not to bury your child. It's not how it's supposed to be. From that tragedy, and both Ed and Matt have suffered that horrific tragedy. From that tragedy, these two fathers have formed organizations to attempt to change what's going on at an individual level by educating, and at a societal level by changing laws to punish those who are participating in this. Ed and his wife Mary developed Song for Charlie, and Matt and his wife Christine developed druginducedhomicide.org. These two organizations are very real. This is a true problem that we face in society. And these two men and their families have dedicated themselves to educating us. So I'm about to turn it over. Ed will give you some introduction, and Matt will have a wonderful call to action for you. But at this point, without further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Ed Ternan to give you some insight into the fentanyl crisis we face in America. Ed?
I'm going to go this way. I'm told this is where they want me. Okay, so it seems like the microphone's working. I'll get more specific than Keone did. It was 40 years ago when we met at Santa Clara University as freshmen. That's a long time ago. That's a lifetime ago. Whenever I give these talks, I do a couple things right up front. And the first thing I typically do is apologize. See, it's happening already. I've never gotten through one of these talks without breaking down a little bit. It's just, it just happens. Grief is, it's its own thing, and it manifests differently for every individual person. And for my thing, it's random bursts of emotion. I can be going through completely dry facts and figures on a PowerPoint slide, and I'll just start tearing up. I don't know when it's coming, so I'm warning you in advance. If you ever wanted to see a grown man cry, or a couple of them, you're in the right place tonight. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I frame what I'm going to talk about today properly. This is a national crisis. It's happening all across this country. It's a big, big problem, but it's also a local crisis. It's happening right here. When I talk to high school kids, I say, this is not a someday, somewhere problem. This is a right here, right now problem. And tonight, sitting among you, there are 4 or 5 parents who lost children in the very same way that Matt did. If you guys would stand, if you don't mind. I want you all to know that these parents all lost young people from drugs that contain fentanyl, and they are all from the surrounding counties right here in your local area. Matt and I flew in from Southern California, and they represent dozens, or maybe more, in your counties right here who are immediately affected by this issue. Thank you guys for having the courage to stand. I see some young people here. Can you raise your hand if you're a high school student? Do you mind? We got a couple? Okay, good. Thank you. This is a problem that it's really important that everybody get engaged with. And so I'm up here tonight, and one of my goals is to get your help. Because as I'll get to, a lot of people are dying because they're consuming fentanyl unknowingly without their knowledge or consent. It's either put in counterfeit prescription pills or it's hidden in other drugs like cocaine and Molly, common party drugs that young people come across all the time. And a lot of the deaths that are occurring are not because kids are asking for fentanyl, although some are, but a good percentage of the deaths are very preventable because young people are dying because they ask for a Xanax and they get a fake pill that's made with fentanyl. So awareness works. If we spread the word and tell everyone that just like there's no real chicken in a McNugget, there's no real Xanax on Snapchat. Don't buy your pills online. Don't trust any pill that comes from a friend or the locker room or a party at the gym, anywhere. Our message is, if that pill doesn't come out of a bottle with two names on it, yours and your doctor's, you cannot put it in your mouth in 2023. It's not real, and it contains fentanyl. Now, who the heck am I, right? Why should you pay attention to me? First of all, I lost my son to this, and I've spent Charlie will be gone 3 years next month. It doesn't get any easier as a grieving parent. Mary and I have dedicated our lives to trying to prevent the next death by raising awareness. That's the lane we chose. Matt is trying to prevent the next death through the lane that he chose. And many of us parents who get engaged in this work, we pick our own little areas of focus and we support each other as much as we can in our different work. Now, the perspective that I bring is not just as a bereaved father, but it's as a businessman. That's where I come from. And as I entered this world, what I found out is the drug world, the world of addressing the drug problem, has been around for a long time. And there are players in that world. There are stakeholders in that world with stakes firmly planted in their turf, right? One of the advantages that I bring, or that people like Matt and these other parents bring, we bring fresh eyes. We ask all the questions because we got no preconceived notions. We got no institutional biases, right? We come in it with fresh legs and open eyes and we say, what's going on? How do we fix it? And we all bring our unique talents to that. Mine are as a businessman. I'm used to dealing with business problems. And I'll tell you that I'm as angry about what happened to my son as any other parent or many of you in this room are. However, my experience in business tells me that when I have a business problem and it threatens our very existence, and we get in that conference room and we got to solve that problem, you can jump up and down and pound the table for a little while, but then you got to calm down and get to work. That's what we're trying to do. So one of the messages I'm going to put out there today is let's talk about what's really going on and how this is happening and how can we talk about this and frame the problem in the right way so that we can move towards solutions. Okay? Now, when your child dies from this and you start calling people and asking questions, interestingly, people will take your calls. In the almost 3 years that I've been in this work, and Mary and I focus on communicating with young people about the chemical nature of the drug supply and how the drug landscape has radically changed by chemicals like fentanyl, and that change is not going away. We talk to everyone. Okay, and so we wanted to get what's going on. And there are 4 basic stakeholder groups that I've identified in this world. And that is, it's a supply and demand problem, right? There's supply reduction, which is interdiction, keep it out of the country. There's demand reduction, which is drug education. There's harm reduction, which are tactics that apply to current users, people already dependent on substances, to keep them healthy till they can get help. And then there are people in the safe supply movement who believe that legalizing more substances is part of the answer. Now, I've talked to all of these groups, and I will tell you this. There are well-intentioned people in every one of those groups who are very committed to solving the problem and reducing drug harms and fentanyl poisonings and overdoses in this country. And that includes cops and people who work at safe injection sites. It includes people who believe cocaine should be legal and people who believe we should lock everybody up. There are people in all of those groups who share that one goal. And so if we can bring them together and get them to start talking to each other instead of at each other, we can maybe arrive at a problem. So I've talked to all of them. I have former Trump administration, top-level NSC, National Security Administration experts on speed dial. I have a relationship with Donald Trump's drug czar, Jim Carroll. I've also met with Biden's drug czar, Dr. Gupta. I've been in the Biden White House. I deal with the Biden administration. This week, I'm going to the Mexican consulate in Los Angeles to meet with Mexican officials to talk to them about the problem. Strange bedfellows is going to be part of this solution. We all got to talk to each other, even those outside of our tribes, to come up with a solution to save lives. 108 going on 110,000 drug deaths a year is not acceptable. And this affects everybody. Okay, so, I can't stand at the podium. I want to cover a couple things, then I'm turning it over to Matt. All right, first is Fentanyl 101. What is fentanyl? Let's just start with the very basics. And again, my goal is to make you all not just a little bit aware of the problem, but the smartest people in the cocktail party about this issue. That's my goal. So, fentanyl is a very potent, very beneficial opioid pain reliever, and it's used safely across the country in medical settings every single day in the United States of America. If you break a bone and end up in an ambulance, they're going to give you fentanyl, and you are going to say, thank you, because it works. If you've had any kind of surgical procedure, you've had fentanyl. Now, that medical fentanyl is not what's killing people in America. The illicit version is what's killing us. And it's very important to make that distinction. The problem arises because fentanyl is synthetic. It's an opioid in the same family as morphine. Basically goes codeine, morphine, legal, right? Codeine, oxycodone, morphine, then illegal heroin, and then fentanyl in terms of potency, right? So it's in that opioid family of substances. But unlike those others, and unlike all drugs in the past, it doesn't come from a plant. It's synthetic. And that changes the whole game. When you ask why is this happening, it's the move from the farm to the lab. The raw materials used to make street drugs going forward are no longer going to be plant-based because synthetic chemical-based substances are a better mousetrap for drug traffickers because it's all profit. If you need more fentanyl to meet demand, you don't have to grow a crop, you don't have to own land, grow a crop, water the crop, harvest the crop, process it, ship it. You get some more of the precursor chemicals, you mix them up in a 55-gallon drum, apply a little heat, sit overnight, and you got more fentanyl. What happens to any commodity when the supply of that commodity is essentially unlimited? What happens to the cost? It goes to the floor. So you've got this substance that has two characteristics. It's really potent, 50 times more potent than heroin, right? It's really potent, and it's really cheap. Folks, it's not going away. Your kids and grandkids are going to be faced with a drug landscape that we never faced, okay? That's the reality, and that's what we have to tell them. That's not going away. Now, let's talk about the potency. 50 times more potent than heroin. Imagine Jack Daniels, which is 80 proof. Imagine a version of Jack Daniels that's 4,000 proof. You're at a party, and you lay out 10 shot glasses on the bar, and you want everybody to have a shot, and you want them to get high. You want them to get a little buzz, but you don't want them to die. How many drops of 4,000 proof Jack Daniels would you have to get precisely into each shot glass so that everybody catches a buzz but nobody dies? Impossible to know, impossible to do. Somebody is going to die. That's what's going on with these counterfeit pills. You take this super potent opioid and you say, man, this is all profit. I'm going to use this to suppress out these fake oxys or fake Percocet or fake Xanax. And you take a batch of powder that's this big, and you add some fentanyl that's this much, and you sprinkle it in there, you stir it up, you will never get that evenly dispersed. So one of the questions we get is, why do drug dealers want to kill their customers? Answer, they don't. and not all their customers are dying. Most people who take these pills either get a dud and nothing happens, or they get high and come back for more. But if you've got about 500 million counterfeit pills floating around the US market on any given day, a very small percentage of those being hot is where you get young people between 12 and 24, 8 to 10,000 a year dying each year. Now, fentanyl is also in other drugs. It's showing up increasingly in cocaine. It's been found in MDMA tablets, in Molly. It's obviously in heroin. That's where it started. It's an opioid like heroin. It started by being added to heroin to reduce cost and boost potency, and then it spread to these other drugs. So young people are dying from consuming fentanyl without their knowledge, and it's happening because of financial reasons. So I don't want to take too much of Matt's time. When we think about this problem, I've concluded that it's better to think about this in terms of a business. We framed this for years as a war on drugs, and that's not working. Let's be honest. First of all, there's only one way, there's only one kind of war. Didn't we learn this in Vietnam? Total war, right? You can't wage half a war, and that's what we've been doing. So we're not really waging a war on drugs, are we? Not when the DEA only interdicts 10% of the drugs that flow into this country. And they were given an impossible task 50 years ago when we declared the war on drugs. And with these synthetics, they're so much easier to move around. That impossible task just got more impossible. So it's better to think about this as a business problem. How do we put these dealers out of business? How do we, and the way to do that, I believe, is to reduce demand. So when we talk to young people, we were advised, if you go in and talk to young people and say, don't do drugs, drugs are bad, they go, yeah, I heard that before, I'm not listening, right? If you say, hey, those pills you see on Snapchat, they're not real perks, they go, oh, thank you for telling me, I didn't know that. Because I wanted a perk, I didn't want fentanyl. So knowledge and awareness is where Mary and I have really decided to focus. But again, some of the things that don't add up, if you think about it as a business and not as terrorism, the primary example is rainbow fentanyl. You guys heard about that, right? Okay, rainbow fentanyl. Now they're making it in colored pills. Now they're coming for our 11-year-old kids. They're trying to kill us all. That is a war framing. Creating colored fentanyl pills and giving them to 11-year-olds trick-or-treaters on Halloween is an act of terrorism. That's not what's happening. By the way, nobody died on Halloween from a rainbow fentanyl pill. Does anybody know anybody who really got a razor blade and an apple on Halloween? Never happened, as far as I know. Okay, what does make sense, though? Let's think about it as a business. Couple of things. We've done a pretty good job of cornering the market with tablets that meet the demand for kids looking for legitimate medications like Oxy and Xanax. We know how to make those that look just like medicines, and that we know what size that market is. We've got a pretty good market share over there. Let's expand our market in a new product line. Let's go after party pills like Molly, and we'll stamp them in different colors, and we won't, maybe we'll mark them M30 like we did the counterfeit prescription pills, but maybe we'll put butterflies and rainbows on them. So what's the real danger? The real danger is, hey, middle school and high school kids, it doesn't matter what color that pill is or what it's marked with. If it didn't come from your doctor, it's fentanyl. And so every minute that we spend worrying about poisoning kids on Halloween, we're burying the lead about what the real problem is with the rainbow fentanyl. So there's another interesting one I'll tell you, and then I'm going to turn it over. Why it's so important to accurately talk about this and bust myths where we can and stay factual. There was a story about a middle school, somewhere in the Central Valley, I think it was. And it was a middle school kid was caught in the hallway with like 300 fentanyl pills. And they took him off him, and he had a wad of cash in his pocket. They took him off him, and a school resource officer was rushed to the hospital for fentanyl exposure. Now let me tell you, you cannot suffer an overdose from fentanyl from touching it. That's a myth. It doesn't happen. Certainly not in a pill. Because a pill is compacted in there and it's 80, 95% inert filler powder. So you can't even get to the fentanyl, right? They took him out of an abundance of caution, the media reports, oh my God, this stuff is so scary. This guy who just touched the pills had to go to the emergency room. Oh my God. Okay, what's the real story? A 13-year-old was selling fentanyl pills on campus in a middle school. That's the story. So, we're about trying to get to what's really going on and about talking about what the real problems are and getting to the facts and getting your help. So what we encourage you to do, if you can, Keone alluded to it, May 9th is coming up. It's the second annual National Fentanyl Awareness Day. Our organization put on the first one. We're doing it again this year. It's a day to go to the website, fentanylawarenessday.org, and get the social media assets we have there and push it out and tell everybody in your social networks what's going on. The other thing we've done this year that's really cool, we have a speaker series. 5 one-hour webinars. They'll be recorded so you don't have to spend your whole day on a Tuesday. 5 one-hour webinars by experts from different areas, all these different groups that we're building coalitions with, talking about the crisis. If you want to really dive deep or have your kids dive deep, watch those one-hour webinars. You'll learn a lot. So, I'm around for questions. I appreciate you all coming out here. It means a lot. This is an important issue, and for you guys to take time out of your evening to hear us talk about it is great. I look forward to your questions, but Matt's got some really important stuff to say, and so I'm gonna muzzle myself. Thanks. All right, buddy.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for having me and inviting me here. I want to clarify something real quick because I know this is being recorded, and it was mentioned that my wife and I started the drug-induced homicide organization. We did not. I serve as president of the drug-induced homicide organization. Terry Almanza, a retired police officer who lost her daughter Sydney back in 2017, is actually the founder of the organization. But I'm honored to serve as president of it. I'm going to try to cover a lot of things semi-quickly, kind of bullet points, because I could go into a lot of detail and we'd be here for 3 or 4 hours. And what I want to, ask of you guys here by the end of what I'm explaining, I think you guys will see the importance of it and how everybody here can help make a difference and hold accountable the people who are out there poisoning our loved ones. Really quick, like Ed and some of the other parents here, I lost my daughter, Alexandra. She was 20 years old, attending Arizona State University. She was visiting us at home in Temecula, California for Christmas back in 2019. She spent the day, December 22nd, Christmas shopping all day with my wife. Came home that evening. I came home from work. Everything was normal. We had dinner. Everybody went off to bed. I got up early the next morning, went to work, and received worst phone call of my life. My youngest daughter said, "Dad, get home. Alex is dead." And of course, I rushed home. There's medics in front of our house, deputy sheriff's vehicle, and I ran in the house, and wife's in hysterics. My youngest daughter is crying, and there's a deputy in front of my daughter's bedroom door. Bedroom door is closed and wouldn't let us in. And again, cutting out a lot of details. After about 30 minutes or so, the deputy sets my wife and I down on our couch, and he simply says, "I'm sorry, but your daughter died of a drug overdose. Here's my card. If you need anything, let me know." That was it. Marked non-criminal, accidental overdose. He did mention that he thought it was possibly fentanyl. And at the time, I had no idea what fentanyl is. Everybody has heard of fentanyl now, but this was back in 2019. But throughout the course of a very immediate investigation by myself and my wife, we actually found out that my daughter was seeking Percocet. And she reached out to a drug dealer on the social media platform, Snapchat. And he sold her counterfeit Percocet, of which she took half of one before going to bed, because the other half was found on her dresser. And she most likely died within just a few minutes of ingesting it. And then my wife had to go in her room the next morning. My daughter had borrowed, because she was visiting from school and she forgot her phone charger, and my wife let her use hers, so she went in her room to get her phone charger back and found her dead. We have to shift this burden of blame from being solely on the user to that person who was willing to risk somebody's life to make a few bucks. And that's an uphill battle right now. The stigma of drug use. Ultimately, what was my daughter trying to do? My daughter suffered from depression. She was diagnosed as a teenager with what was called massive depressive disorder. But she was a very high-functioning young lady. She got into Arizona State University on a full academic scholarship. But she had internal issues. We all have, none of us are perfect. And she sought to self-medicate. And somebody else sought to make $1 off of her life. But yet her death was marked non-criminal. So that's what I set out to change. What did we do? We let this person continue to sell and ruin more families, take more lives? So I want to tell you some of the problems with our laws in California and why it's very difficult to hold a drug dealer responsible for somebody's death. We have to prove something that the legal term is known as implied malice. You have to prove that the drug dealer had specific knowledge that the drugs they were selling could result in somebody's death. That is very hard to do. Okay? Inherently, we all know dealing drugs is dangerous. That's why it's illegal. But that's not enough to prove that the drug dealer knew that the drugs he was distributing or selling or giving or whatever could cause somebody's death. I want to read something to you. And I'm not going to go deep into it, but the drug dealer responsible for my daughter's death, he was eventually arrested on federal charges, not state charges, because our state laws simply suck. And he's now spending 9 years in federal prison. But, But I want to read this to you. As part of the state investigation, here's what we got him to acknowledge. He signed this. I have a signed statement with this. And it reads, specifically on the night of December 22nd, 2019, Alexandra Capelouto asked defendant if he could sell her Percocet pills, a prescription painkiller. Defendant agreed to sell Alexandra Percocet pills. Defendant drove to Alexandra's home in Temecula, California, and sold her what turned out to be approximately 11 counterfeit oxycodone pills that he later described to law enforcement as blue oxys or M30s. Defendant knew it was illegal for him to sell the pills and that they contained fentanyl or some other federally controlled substance. Upon going to bed the night of December 22nd, 2019, Alexandra Capelouto ingested half of one of the pills. The fentanyl entered her system, poisoning her body, and caused her death. At the state level, all we could charge him with was drug sales. And because he didn't have a prior arrest record, he would have spent, at best, a year behind bars. You hear this a lot, that we're not going to arrest our way out of this. But I want to tell you a statistic that nobody ever talks about. Only about 1%, if that, it's approximately 1%, of all drug deaths result in the conviction of a drug dealer. That's just crazy. And with fentanyl on the market, we're letting drug dealers, fentanyl dealers, we're turning them into serial killers. We really are. Am I to think that my daughter was this drug dealer's only customer? Highly unlikely. It's just whoever died, most likely, Mark, accidental overdose. So, we've got a solution. We've got a solution that will not only dissuade drug dealers from dealing deadly drugs, but it'll lock up those who continue to do so. We came up with something that we dubbed Alexander's Law, and it's pretty simple. If someone is convicted of manufacturing or selling illicit drugs, they will receive a warning letting them know that if they don't stop and someone dies as a result of their continued action, they can be charged with murder. The fact that this admonishment was given would be kept on record, and if necessary, used as evidence of their knowledge in a subsequent conviction where a death has resulted. It's simple. It's a warning. You sell drugs, you get caught, you get convicted, you get this warning. Now you know. We've presented this bill, and by the way, this is the same exact way that we handle driving under the influence in California. If you ever hear of anybody being charged with manslaughter or murder from a DUI where they killed somebody, it's only because they had a prior DUI conviction where they were given a similar admonishment. So we thought, perfect, let's do the same thing with drug dealers. Makes sense, right? Our legislature has failed for 3 years to pass this. The first time around 3 years ago, worked closely with State Senator Melissa Melendez. Some of you may know her. She is actually, she was at the time my state senator in Temecula, California. When this happened, we went to her to help us get this done. And it went before, and I want to explain this real quick. I know I got to be quick here. Some of you a lot of you probably already know this, but I didn't know how it worked until I got into this boat. We have 40 state senators in California. Of those 40 state senators, they're all divided into different committees. You have a health committee, you've got transportation committee, and then you also have what is known as the public safety committee, which I have recently dubbed the public hazard committee. Okay, consists of 5 senators. For the very first step in getting a law passed, this particular bill, because it is potentially punitive, it could lead to somebody spending time behind bars, it goes before the Public Safety Committee. You have to get 3 of these 5 senators to vote yes on it for it to go to the full Senate for them to vote on. You get the majority of the senators to vote on it, then it goes to the governor to get signed into law. That's basically how it works in a nutshell. This time around, this last year, I worked with a Democratic senator, Senator Tom Umberg, great senator. We had bipartisan support. We had over 20 state senators endorse the bill. That means if we could have gotten it to them, this would have passed. But it first goes to this committee. And only one of the 5 committee members supports the bill. So it gets killed in committee before it can go to the full Senate. And that's our big problem. This committee, they are holding Californians hostage. And it's not just with drug laws, it's anything that's punitive. It's why we have such high crime rates in California, because nobody is held accountable, and it all stems from this committee. I know on your chairs there was some paperwork. I think some of it got passed around. One of the papers was a copy of our bill. I hope you guys have that. It looked like this. You can read it over. It gets a little more into detail of it. But on the back of it, or another paper, there was also a list of all of the of the organizations and entities that supported our bill. I don't know how many are here, maybe 50, 60, 70 roughly. Just so you know, the opposition, there was only 4 or 5 organizations that opposed this law, compared to, I don't know if you could see from there, I'm guessing 60, 70, 80, I don't know, supported it. These senators on this committee are supposed to do the will of the people, right? I don't think that's happening. So, basically, what now? Well, our bill is up for reconsideration. And what that means is it'll be, if Senator Umberg chooses to, he can present this bill one more time to the same committee, and it basically gives them an opportunity to change their minds. So there's another paper that you guys should have that, that lists the committee members. It looks like this. And my ask of you, starting tomorrow, and you don't have to, make it part of your daily routine. You don't have to just do it once. Every opportunity that you have, please call their office number or send them an email directly letting them know that California needs to pass this law. I put one other person on here, and it's Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon. I just got his name recently. He does not sit on that committee, but he actually assigns the committee members. And my ask of you would be to call and or email him, asking him not to put these type of people on that safety committee. I don't want to delve too much into politics, just my take on things over the last few years. Even though we are a very heavily Democratic state, what I have learned from the vast number of senators and assembly people that I have met now is that most of our Democratic senators and assembly people are fairly center, okay? They're fairly center. That's why the majority of them wanted to support and pass this law. It's the extreme of the extreme that sits on this committee, though. And why does Anthony Rendon put the extreme of the extreme on this committee? So we need to let him know that I'm sort of drawing a blank on what we can tell him, but tell him this is unacceptable. I look forward to getting to a Q&A session here, because I know people are going to have questions. Let me just scan my notes real quick, make sure there's nothing I'm missing here. I've got another simple ask. Fentanyl is the #1 cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. #1 cause of death. And we don't hold those responsible who are distributing this in our society? Well, you know what our organization is about, drug-induced homicide. Our focus is on holding those accountable right here in our own communities who are poisoning our loved ones. You have a postcard, I think I left it on all the chairs also, it has our organization. We are a 501c3, so any contributions are tax deductible. But one of the things that we're starting right now is a media campaign, a social media campaign against these 4 senators on this committee. So if you can spare a Starbucks, if you can spare, skipping out on an extra pair of shoes or something, that I would greatly and gracefully accept any donations you might make that will help us fund this social media ad campaign that we're going to do, making Californians aware of these senators, because we have to get them out of office. That's the only way we are going to get any crime type of bills that hold people accountable passed in California, is if we get them unseated. I'm probably going to walk away thinking, gosh, I should have said this, should have said that. But, we are going to have a Q&A here, so hopefully people will maybe trigger some thoughts, and I can mention some things that I'm potentially forgetting. But that's about it. I thank you guys for listening to me.
Matt, please don't worry, because we're going to give you time to gather your thoughts and make sure you leave here with nothing that you want to say unsaid. Bitter or better? That's ultimately the challenge we all face when life presents us with unfavorable circumstances, or worse, a tragedy the kind that these families had suffered. And both of these families, Matt's family and Ed's family, are making the world better. And I have goosebumps, and I'm sure you do too. So let's start by thanking them. How you can honor them and their work that they're doing, which is awfully courageous. I mean, I know men don't like to cry in public, and it's impossible to talk about losing a child and not crying, is by making tonight matter. You showed up tonight, and that means you're part of the solution already. Every day of your life, please talk about this. Tell someone. Explain to someone that you can order a pizza as easily in college now as you can order a pill laced with fentanyl. Tell someone. That's how you can say thank you to Matt and Ed. Who's putting the pressure on these legislatures not to support your bill?
Well, I think it's an ideology. They don't. It's all about just social justice reform. Arguments that have been brought up by some of the senators are they don't want to put more people behind bars because in doing so, somehow people of color seem to bear the brunt of that and get locked up at higher rates than white people. So that's an excuse by one of the senators. It's they want to get to the root cause of drug use and think that time and energy and money is better spent toward that, and we have arguments, to counter these. Let's talk about the root causes of greed. People who are out selling this because it's an easy job rather than wanting to get a legitimate job and make money legally. As far as anybody funding these senators, I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist type of person, but my mind goes there when I hear these people not support a bill that makes as much sense as this does.
I might just weigh in on a conceptual level. What's going on is things have really changed rapidly in terms of the drug scene in America, and our criminal justice system has not caught up to it. So one of the persistent narratives out there and the motivation behind some opposition to a law like this is what I call the fellow user narrative, where the logic is that when someone dies of a drug overdose, most of the time the person who furnished the substance to the person who died was a fellow drug user, probably also addicted, maybe selling a little bit of some dime bags on the side just to support her own habit. So she doesn't need prosecution and jail time. What she needs is rehab, rehabilitation, and help. The difference is that that's changed and our system hasn't caught up to it yet. That scenario, I believe, is on the decline, and what's on the rise is more like the experience that our families here had who are in this room tonight. Drug dealing has become more institutionalized, and it has moved online, and so it is now more anonymous, transactional. I can tell you that my son Charlie never laid eyes on the kid who sold him the pill that killed him. His friend set up the buy through a social media app and then went and certainly never partied with them. These people were not friends. I sat in a courtroom with this young man 2 weeks ago in Santa Clara County Juvenile Court. He was 17 at the time that he sold this pill to Charlie. This is a criminal, and he's not a drug addict, and he was in this for the money. On the afternoon Charlie died, we saw a photo that he posted on his social media smoking a blunt and brandishing his Glock on the afternoon of May 14th as Charlie lay dying in his fraternity house. So the fellow user narrative persists, and all that Matt's asking is to give prosecutors the discretion they need to distinguish between that scenario, which still exists, and this new scenario, which now also exists. And selling a substance under false pretenses, if someone asks you for a Percocet and you knowingly give them what we call a fentanyl, a counterfeit made of fentanyl, that's a different level of crime. And our laws haven't been updated yet to handle that. And that's what Matt's taking on.
Ed, we got to hear a little bit about Matt's daughter and her normal life and her college and her Christmas shopping. Could you just say a little bit about Charlie? Because I feel like he's in the room and we haven't really honored him.
Well, thank you. And Charlie was a great guy, like all of our children were. And, you know, we miss him terribly. We don't have any rose-colored glasses on about my son, Charlie. A lot of the people we know who died from these fake pills or sometimes cocaine were high school kids, juniors and seniors, 17, 18 years old, sometimes younger. Charlie was a 22-year-old college senior, so he was on the party scene. He knew what was going on. He was pretty smart about what was happening. But we also know from his toxicology report that Charlie did not have a tolerance for opioids at the time of his death, because the doctors looked at the toxicology report and said that's not a lot of fentanyl in his system. If he had been addicted to opioids at the time, it would have taken a lot more fentanyl to kill him. Charlie was a great guy, a connector, a Santa Clara legacy. My wife and I met there. His older two siblings went there. By the time he showed up, he was kind of a big man on campus. So when he died right next to the campus, it was a big deal. It was very early COVID, and it was a disaster. So we ask ourselves all the time, what would Charlie want us to do? And we say to ourselves, I get emotional, but the reason we named our organization Song for Charlie is because he loved music and the arts, and coming from a kind of a 70s and 80s rock and roll family, and big Tom Petty fans, and the youngest of three kids, Charlie knew all the words to every song, whether it was rap or and Mary and I tell ourselves we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't have some hope that we could make an impact. And that's what Charlie would want us to do, is kind of focus on the positive. He wouldn't want this to happen to any of his friends. And so we kind of pick up from there and say, well, let's just go out and warn the kids directly and get to them as directly as we can and just warn them, because they're not looking for fentanyl. And if they know this stuff is fake and they know to watch out for it, maybe we can help. So that's kind of where we landed.
And Charlie was 3 weeks from his college graduation.
Again,
right?
I don't want to do the grief porn thing here, but he was with us for a couple months. It was the initial lockdowns from COVID, so we knew he was okay. He lived with us for a couple of months. We had eyes on him, right? And he came back up to Santa Clara a month before graduation to see his girlfriend and his friends just before they graduated and started their lives. And he died on the Thursday, 3 weeks before graduation Saturday. And so Mary and I look at each other and say, we were almost there. We had number 3 almost out the door, and then our world just blew up. So that's what happened to us.
I wanted Ed to share that with you because I want you to get how normal their lives were, how normal these kids were. And frankly, but for the grace of God, because I know you're all thinking the same thing I'm thinking, which is, if I had been Charlie's age, would that have happened to me? You just can't make one silly, dumb mistake anymore. It could be fatal. So, question about Snapchat, which has come up a couple of times. One person asked, if Snapchat disappears, how did you actually do the discovery on that? And what is the role of Snapchat in drug disbursement?
Do you want to go first, or you want me?
Go ahead, and then I'll...
Okay. Snapchat is where, in the last few years, drug deals are typically consummated. So Snapchat is designed so that when you open the app, it opens to your camera. It's not a social media feed, and the idea is you take snaps, pictures, and you share them with your circle of friends. And once that friend opens that picture, the snap goes away. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the product's designed that way. And I know a lot about this because I work very closely with the people at Snapchat. So Mary and I kind of zigged where others have zagged, where we said to ourselves, well, after looking into suing them for wrongful death, we said, well, that's just not going to work. And we had two very high-profile national law firms come back and tell us it's not going to work. And then we said, well, what if we could make them our allies instead of our adversaries? And long story short, we got their attention. And, Matt and I were talking with a couple of folks at dinner, and you mentioned that in 2019, you were the one who informed some law enforcement people about the counterfeit pills. And they didn't know about the counterfeiting. Same thing happened with us when we reached out to Snapchat, the people at Snap. We finally got a hold of them, and they said, okay, tell us what's going on. We said, well, they were like, we have rules. You can't deal drugs on our platform. We have trust and safety policies. We don't allow that. I said, I get that. Everybody does. All the platforms say that. What you don't know is those perks on your platform, they're not perks. And they said, what do you mean? We told them the story. Counterfeits made of fentanyl. And they basically, to their great credit, they knew their user base, 13 to 23-year-olds in the United States, is right in the blast zone for this, and they jumped on it right away. And we've been working with them ever since. They've changed their internal policies. They support us with ad credits. We've reached tens of millions of young people on their app, warning them about this stuff. So typically what happens with drug dealing is drug dealers will post their wares on some place like Instagram where the menu can stay up. And then they will say, jump over to Snapchat. Now, let me tell you a story. I know firsthand that Snapchat, the app, has become a much more hostile environment for drug dealers because of the policy changes that they've made. My wife has an Instagram account that is also connected to the Song for Charlie Instagram account, which posts drug-related awareness content, right? So for some reason, the Instagram algorithm pushes drug dealers into my wife's DMs. Seriously. We have relationships with these platforms. 100% of them, this has been going on for the last few months, 100% of them say, here's my menu here on Instagram. Come hit me up over here on Telegram. Not one of them say Snapchat anymore. So it's whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole applies in this world, whether you're talking about, you hear people, the DEA say, as soon as we get one kingpin, another one merges up. And as soon as we stop one substance, a new one comes along. Same thing happens with social media. As soon as one tightens down on the policy, they go find another one. So what's going on behind the scenes with the social media companies is some collaboration to create an all-of-internet solution to share signals between platforms and get these people off the internet to make the U.S. social media environment as hostile as we possibly can for drug dealers.
I'll touch on this real quick, tying it back to California. One of the senators, Nancy Skinner, who sits on that public safety committee, she's introduced her own bill targeting social media to make them have to do a better job of policing themselves. And I'm really honestly left perplexed. She's willing to hold social media responsible, but she does not want to hold responsible the drug dealers that use social media. That's Nancy Skinner.
On the Public Safety Committee.
I think maybe the Public Safety Committee is going to have a little inbox influx tomorrow. One of the questions that everybody asks is, and I think that the kids think this is, can't you test the pills? Can't you figure out, okay, they all look alike, but we could test them, right?
Okay, so great question. Thank you for whoever asked that question. There are fentanyl test strips out there. that the background for that is that they are designed for workplace drug testing, and they test urine. So by definition, they test liquids. They're like a pregnancy test, right? You dip a little piece of cardboard stick in there, and you get it wet, and it gives you a reading, okay? So the idea is you dissolve a sample of your substance in liquid and test it. So here's the challenge. If you test a baggie of cocaine, in theory, harm reduction people will tell you, or heroin, if you shake it up, you can probably have a fair chance of getting the powder dispersed enough, so if you take a small sample and test it, you'll detect the fentanyl. These test strips detect fentanyl pretty accurately. Here's the problem with the tablet. You have to destroy the tablet to test it. There's this thing called the chocolate chip cookie effect, where if you take a little chunk of the pill, because nobody wants to destroy their drug to test it, right? They just want to test a little bit of it. But if you take a chunk of the pill or scrape the pill and test it, there's a chance you'll get a negative, but there will actually be fentanyl in the tablet. Also, the whole problem is inconsistent dosing, right? Remember the 4,000 proof Jack Daniels? If you got a baggie of 10 pills and you crush one and test it, and it tests negative, that doesn't mean the other 9 don't have fentanyl in them. So one of the things we say about testing tablets is this. If you got that tablet on the street, you're asking a question that's already been answered. It contains fentanyl. They all do now. They all do. So the question is...
And would you say that again? They all do?
Okay, a couple of years ago when I first started this, and we were working with people, we said, we're going to go talk to kids. They said, you got to be careful. You can't lie to them. If they catch you exaggerating, am I right, kids? They tell you if they catch you lying or exaggerating, you've lost them. They won't believe you again. If you tell these kids there's no Xanax on Snapchat, sure enough, somebody's going to go find a real one, and your credibility is shot. Okay. Fast forward 2 years, nobody says that anymore. Consensus, law enforcement, harm reduction people, everybody. Everything on the street now, they're pressed pills, they're fake, and if they're pressed, they're made with fentanyl. It is the raw material of choice of these drug traffickers. And there are other synthetics now coming down the line. So you can't trust any of them. We're very confident in that statement now.
Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Ed hit that one pretty good.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the cartels in Mexico, because that's where most of this is coming from.
Go, Matt. Come on. Well, you bailed on the last one, so this one's yours.
Well, there's no doubt that the cartels should be deemed foreign terrorist organizations. There's no terrorist organization responsible for more deaths than those operating south of our border. And I'm sure Ed will elaborate on this. There's no reason we can't do to them what we did to ISIS, Al-Qaeda. We don't even have to send troops in. We could do this with drones. There's 2 main cartels in Mexico. We know where they're operating from. We can destroy their labs and put a serious dent in their operations. And if they rebuild, we do it again. And we do it again, and we do it again. I don't know why our federal administration is not doing something about this. 70,000 Americans last year dead from a man-made chemical that's coming across our border is just simply inexplicable. But I do mention this. As a citizen of California, as a dad, a small business owner, there's not a lot I can do to affect change in Mexico. There's not a lot, honestly, that any of us can do to affect global change. That's for the higher-ups in Washington, D.C. We can, though, get on our legislators right here in California. We can demand that they hold the drug dealers here accountable, and that will put a dent in things, too.
Do you have any sense of who is sponsoring the people who are not voting to get your bill to the floor? In other words, is there any money behind those particular people in terms of their campaigns?
And I didn't catch that first part. Were you talking about those who are opposing the bill? How
Those
are they
who,
funded?
yeah.
I don't know. Again, I've never been a conspiracy theorist. I've never been. But when you have something that is so, black and white as this, I mean, everybody agrees on it. Everybody. And you have this committee, and it's not that they don't get it. They do. They understand it. So I don't know who's funding their campaigns. I wish I knew. But I do know that they are not doing the will of their constituents. That I do know.
Okay.
Can I throw in a kind of a conceptual idea here? My experience is that as I look at these different groups, supply reduction, demand reduction, harm reduction, imagine that you have been working for a long time to destigmatize drug use. And when it comes to people who are addicted, it's very important that we don't stigmatize those people. We don't stigmatize people who have cancer. And that's the argument, right? So if you are an addicted person, we want to help you. And what's happened is that for years, this has been seen as a movement, the harm reduction movement, and they've made great strides. In fact, they now pretty much hold the political high ground. Now, imagine you're working in that field and you've made all this progress over the last 20 years or so, and all of a sudden, people start dying in the thousands from illegal street drugs. Your narrative is now threatened. Your whole worldview is threatened. And so they are being pretty aggressive at pushing back on any kind of erosion of their, what they consider their hard-fought position that drug users are people too. We are not to destigmatize against them. They need help and dignity and rehab, not incarceration. And so that's what Matt and his movement is pushing against, is people bitterly defending what is an eroding framework.
And remember, it's just a warning.
Yeah.
It's just a darn warning.
Right, but my explanation explains the overreaction to your very reasonable request, right? Is because people they're holding on to their stake in the ground, and that's what you're up against, I think.
And I do believe this. I don't know where my daughter would have gone in terms of substance use disorder, but I do believe a line is crossed. When you go from being a drug user to a drug dealer, you go from needing to be helped to needing to be held accountable. Without accountability, yeah.
I agree with that.
We do it with drunk drivers. I mean, if by their philosophy, if somebody kills somebody from being involved in a DUI and they're an alcoholic, they should be let off the hook, right? That's their mentality. But of course, our DUI laws don't allow for that, and it shouldn't allow for this with drug dealers either.
I think that's a really good differentiation. We can understand things without excusing them.
Right.
Yeah. So a couple of more questions about the border and Mexico's involvement. Somebody is asking about people paying human smugglers, being basically paying for their entry into the United States by being willing to smuggle drugs. Do you know anything about that?
Again, it's interesting, and I said it in my earlier comments, that we want to make sure we're framing things correctly so that we're not misdirecting resources. So when you talk about the southern border, there is no question that the United States' proximity to the southern border where the cartels operate is the reason why we're being flooded with fentanyl. Now, most of the seizures of illegal drugs which occur don't occur on the river. It's not people waiting across the Rio Grande with backpacks. And again, when you think about it like a business, it starts to make more sense. Most of the seizures occur at San Ysidro and Nogales, where people are driving their cars across the legal entry points. And most of the people arrested for bringing drugs into this country are American citizens who drive down to Mexico and bring drugs back, right? Now, there's the argument that says, well, you can't measure how many you didn't seize, right? Well, then, if you're seizing that, where does it come in? So I'm not saying that there are no fake pills or powdered fentanyl coming across the desert or the river. But I am saying that if you put a wall across the entire southern border, you would not fix the fentanyl problem. It's too easy to smuggle. Look at the head of the law enforcement union right here in Santa Clara County. She wasn't driving across the border to get fentanyl. She was going on the dark web. As long as there's demand on this side of the border, somebody will find a way to get it here. And it's gotten easier than ever to get it in here now because of the characteristics of the substance. So I'm not saying don't do any interdiction, but...
Excuse me, but do you all know who Ed's referring to? An executive of the San Jose Police Officers Association. Yeah, arrested because she was getting fentanyl to disperse. On the city's dime, yeah.
I do want to mention something also. Even if our borders were sealed today and we completely stopped fentanyl from coming across our border, there's enough fentanyl stockpiled in the United States right now to cause a magnitude of death for decades to come. Keep that in mind. So again, I'm harping the same point, but until we start holding those here accountable, how do we expect to do anything in other countries when we can't even hold the drug dealers here accountable?
And I had a very interesting conversation with a former Trump administration official who spent a few years focusing on this issue. And his input was, Mexico is bordering on being a failed narco state. And if we're counting on that government to fix our problem, we will wait forever. We have to fix it, do whatever we can here on this side of the border to address the problem, because that's the only thing we control.
Yeah, we are talking about chemicals coming across the Mexican border, but I think we need to acknowledge that the components of this are coming from another country who we should not wait to fix our problems, and that is China. Do you want to speak to that?
Your turn.
So under President Trump, he did do something that sort of had, in theory it should have helped, but it really had unintended consequences, which didn't change the situation, and some might argue made it worse. But he did get China to agree to stop exporting fentanyl. Okay, so what did China do to work around that? Now they just export the precursor, in layman's terms, the ingredients that make up fentanyl. They send that to the cartels then to put the final product together. So it really didn't do much to help the problem. So you might want to.
And it speaks to the whack-a-mole problem again, right? As long as there's demand here, they will find a way to meet that demand. And the geopolitical situation is way above our pay grade. And some of the conversations I have, these fancy pants guys that did some work in Washington, D.C. and all that kind of stuff and had high security clearances will say, well, what I can say in a non-classified setting is, the fact is it's complicated. And there's stuff going on that some of the stuff that seems obvious to us, like why don't we just bomb the cartels, or why don't we do this or that to China? It's like there's a lot of geopolitical considerations going into this. And there are, frankly, cost-benefit analysis that go into this above our heads, everybody. Somebody's figuring out just how many drug deaths will we tolerate before we do something. There's that cost-benefit analysis going on way up high.
Somebody's figuring out how much value your child's life has.
Well, I will tell you that what one person told me, former DEA agent, said, people say we ought to treat this like the war on terror. You know what the difference is? The extent of our economic relationship with Afghanistan and Iraq versus the depth of our economic relationship with Mexico. We are very intertwined with both Mexico and China economically, and if you close the border or shut down, are we willing to pay the economic price the devastation that would put on this economy and theirs? Those are the kind of calculations that are being made at the highest levels, where it kind of explains some of the frustration, where some things seem so obvious. Just bomb Sinaloa. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, Another thing that I think is very important, remember, I'm meeting with the Mexican consulate on Thursday. Another thing that my friends there say, and I really opened my eyes. We see everything from our perspective. They have their own problems and priorities down there in Mexico that they're dealing with, the murder rate and the crime that's associated with these cartels killing each other and killing tourists and everything else, right? So they're grappling with their own stuff down there, and we've got relationships between the two countries, Mexico and the U.S., are kind of rocky right now, right? So how do we get those two governments working together again and finding common ground to say, this problem is hurting both sides? Can we stop talking at each other and start talking to each other? Because both sides are suffering. The people in Mexico hate the border problem and they hate the drug problem. And the citizens in Mexico have one of the considerations about cross the border and invade Mexico is not the Mexican government and it's not the cartels, it's the Mexican people. I'm told they would rise up because of their national pride, and they're very important to them that they have autonomy from the big brother to the north. And you have to consider that when you think about some of this drastic warlike action that seems like it would feel really good. There are some reasons why we have to be really, really sensitive about that.
Do you have any opinion about these safe injection sites?
Of course. I have opinion about everything, yeah.
Would you like to share it?
What I believe, again, as a businessman, is when I'm faced with a problem, is I deconstruct the problem, I reverse engineer it, and I apply the appropriate solution to each component. Safe injection sites are good solutions for people who need drugs. People who are addicted cannot function without that substance. Those are providing a safe place for those people to use until they can wean off the drugs and get better makes sense. A safe injection site doesn't do anything for my son, and it wouldn't have helped Matt's daughter, and it wouldn't have helped these young people who died in this room. Different population, different problem. So my only challenge with it is we talk a lot about safe injection sites and harm reduction tactics, and the people in the harm reduction world, I'm trying to change the way they talk. They talk about people who use drugs. We have to have compassion for people who use drugs. And my point is, that is too broad a term. That means the 13-year-old who's dabbing for the first time with his vape pen in his room to the person who needs meth every day to get by. So, like Matt said, let's make the distinction between people who use drugs and people who sell drugs. Let's create a category that says people who need drugs. It's a very important category, and they need help, and they need our support till we can get them better. But the solutions for them don't apply everywhere. So we can't have broad brush solutions. So safe injection sites, sure, for their limited use, makes a lot of sense. But when that's all you fund in the city of San Francisco with no treatment centers or prevention education, it's all downstream solution. You haven't fixed the problem upstream. So that's it's the balance.
Matt, did you want to jump in there?
It goes a little bit deeper. It goes really to our failed way of treating those with addiction. The problem is the drugs that are out there today, they take a lot longer to get off of than your 30-day programs. These, treatment, long-term treatment is virtually unobtainable because it's unaffordable for any common family to put their loved one in a long-term treatment facility. And I do agree with Ed that it can have its place for a certain segment, but from everything that I've read, any areas that have these safe injection sites, addiction rates grow, more crime comes to those areas, and it's facilitating the problem even more. So I don't know if we differ in a sense. I mean, I understand Ed's point, but we can't enable people to do drugs and not have a means of getting them proper treatment. And right now we don't have a means of getting them treatment.
Okay. What about Narcan?
I'll touch on this, and I'm sure Ed will touch on it too. The vast majority of parents that I've met over the last few years, not all, but the majority, our kids died by themselves. There was nobody around to administer Narcan. Not that it doesn't have its place, but I think there's been so much hype. Even the governor coming out a few weeks ago mentioning how California is going to invest in all this Narcan. Just as they like to say, we're not going to arrest our way out of this, we're not going to Narcan our way out of it either. But I still support it. We need a cumulative effort. We need many tools. And unfortunately, the mindset of those on the safety committee is they only want their set of tools, and those set of tools would have done nothing to save Charlie or my Alexandra. So we need more tools. Narcan is one, but we also need the law enforcement end of it.
And I understand there's a new drug called Trank, which Narcan does not work on it. It's not responsive to it. That's a veterinary tranquilizer, and that's the newest thing after fentanyl, but it's showing up in the fentanyl and the meth.
So, yes, the big picture, as I said earlier, is that the illicit drug market, the illicit drug landscape has moved from plant-based, basically organic substances to chemicals. So if you buy a baggie of heroin on the street now, and there are places that will take samples of street drugs and test them, you will likely find that baggie contains maybe 8 or 9% heroin, 2 or 3 fentanyl analogs, maybe some xylazine, maybe a little benzo. It's chemical soup. So what is xylazine? Xylazine, we don't think, is showing up in pills or cocaine. One of the characteristics of fentanyl is it comes on really fast and then wears off really fast. Street-level dealers in the United States are buying what is essentially a legal veterinary medicine. It's a sedative, and they're adding it to their fentanyl-based bags of what they call down on the street. It's not, they don't even call it heroin anymore because it gives it legs. And so it's a little bit, people will go, hey, mine's the good stuff. It doesn't just last 2 hours, it lasts 3 hours. That's why they're adding Trank to heroin. The problem is 2 things. Number 1, it causes really nasty skin lesions. And number 2, it's not an opioid. So, and again, sometimes my family gives me a hard time. They call me Captain Nuance because I'm always splitting hairs. But details are important. You've heard of Captain Obvious, right? The Captain Nuance. So, xylazine is not an opioid, but it does suppress respiration. So if someone takes an opioid that has some fentanyl and some Trank in it, the Narcan will work on the opioid, but it will not work on the xylazine. So multiple doses of Narcan might be required. But also you might get all the opioid off the opioid receptors, and the xylazine has just repressed the breathing so much that the person dies anyway. So it's a very scary situation for, right now, heroin users. We haven't seen it move into other drugs yet. It's a high enhancer for street heroin.
So a couple of questions about kids' perceptions, young people's perceptions. One about their perception of Narcan. Are they thinking, I can do this, and if there's a problem, maybe, I don't intend to do it, but Narcan's just around the corner. Is that what they mostly presume? And also, what do you recommend that people say to their kids about this now? Like, what is the most potent and effective message that parents and grandparents and people who love each other, sisters and brothers, can give to their families?
You want to start or you want me to start?
Go for it.
So this is what we do for a living. What I sometimes explain to people is each of our individual experience as parents takes us down our own path. And Mary and I didn't get into the political advocacy path. We basically built a company. Now, it's a nonprofit company, but we produce and distribute content related to drug use in the age of fentanyl, and we get it to young people in schools and families as fast as we can. That's what we do for a living. So, how to talk to kids. Here's what the experts tell us. I said earlier, don't lie to them, okay? Number two, no judgment. This is not about a morality lecture, and I think we can it come from a place of concern, and it's a warning about a public health crisis. We emphasize that it is not the fault of these young people. You did not cause this problem, but it is affecting you specifically, you and your friends. The other interesting thing that was a light bulb moment for me, that teachers and counselors and frankly social media marketers who we work with who know what messages land with kids, triangulate. The adolescent mind is designed to take risks, so an individual teenager feels bulletproof. So if you say, Dolph, don't do this because I don't want you to get hurt, that doesn't land as much as, Dolph, make sure you take care of Keone, right? Don't let him, you don't want this to happen to any of your friend group. So tell everyone you know these pills are fake and you can't trust these drugs out there. So it comes from a place of care and concern. It's kind of a public health warning, not a moral message. Appeal to their peer affinity and get them engaged and empowered and say, hey, take this on, kids. You know, this is a problem you can really solve. I'm wandering a little bit, but our kids are overwhelmed now with, I think, two intersecting things. Number one, no boundaries. You can be anything you want on any given day. The sky's the limits. Of course, young people need boundaries or they have nothing to push up against. At the same time, we're giving them all this room. We're also putting all this pressure on them, like your generation has to fix climate change, world hunger, world war, and cancer. So what we say is, you know what, young people? Here's a problem you can really solve. Here's the math. 7,500 drug deaths in the last couple of years of high school, college-age kids. 6,000 of those, 80%, involved fentanyl. We won't save them all, but what if we could get that 6,000 down to 1,000? You could actually save 5,000 of your peers' lives in the next 12 to 18 months just by telling everyone you know what's going on. That's a bite-sized problem that you can actually solve that's within your power. So a big part of our message is this: empowering young people to fix this problem that's impacting them disproportionately.
Ed nailed it, and there's no organization better than Song for Charlie for getting this messaging out to our youth and young people. But I'm gonna, you guys are gonna laugh at me, I'm gonna turn this back to the safety committee real quick.
Actually, there are a lot of people interested in the safety committee, and they want names.
Okay, well,
they want names. This group wants names.
Because what I wanted to mention is, our bill, we had to make a lot of amendments to it to get them to even consider passing it. So along the whole process, as the senators were, our senator who was authoring the bill, Tom Umberg, was negotiating with these senators, trying to get them to support it. One of the things we caved on was the Senate committee members that opposed it. They did not want the warning being given to anybody that was a minor. Now, to me, if you're a minor selling drugs, what better person to warn, right? Let's set them on the right track while they're young. But that was one of the amendments that, and we did have an inkling that, we did think for a little bit that we were going to get this bill passed out of committee with the amendments we made, and that was one of the ones that we gave into, that we would, that this warning would not be applicable to minors.
I don't even, sometimes I just stand up here completely astounded at what I hear. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. I think we need to acknowledge one more thing about young people's attitude and exposure, and that is they are so used to everybody around them taking a ton of medication. The pharmaceutical companies have been incredibly effective at promoting their products. So all of our cabinets are filled with medicine. The kids don't think anything about taking somebody else's medicine. Am I right? If somebody has a pill, you share the pill, right? It's not a big deal to them. So what's the best way to explain that synthetic medication isn't the normal way to handle life?
This is a mental health issue, and I blame a lot of this on social media. Our kids, probably anybody, probably 35 and younger at this point, grew up with this grand experiment of social media. We didn't know what all of the negative aspects of it were going to be, and now we know firsthand what some of those negatives are. And so I think it goes to mental health. All our kids, probably again 35 and younger, go to the doctor. They have a pill for everything. Anxiety, ADD, can't concentrate. Here, take this, take that. And so they've pills. It's seemingly safe. Take a pill for everything. And I don't claim to have the answers. I'm just saying, there's probably not too many people who turn to drugs that, are completely 100% happy with their lives. And we have to fix that. We have to fix it from a mental health standpoint.
Okay. Both of these gentlemen have tremendous websites. Matt has the answers that many of you are looking for. Who to contact, how to contact them, and you can do that immediately. You could do that before you go to bed tonight. It's just a terrific and very focused website to reach out to the people in California and make our voices heard, that this is just completely unacceptable. Song for Charlie's website is one of the most accessible websites I've ever actually seen. And you can just jump on there and get facts without doing a whole lot of work. The videos are very short. It's extremely interactive and appealing. And I just encourage you to share that website with somebody regularly. Lots of somebodies this week, okay, to take that with you. Gentlemen, this has been an incredibly moving evening for all of us. The fact that you stood here with your hearts and your sorrow and your passion and your dignity is a beautiful gift to the Liberty Forum, and I want to thank you. I want to offer you each an opportunity to have some closing comments and perhaps marching orders for us this evening.
Well, I'll go because I want Matt to close. And thanks all for your kind words. It is a deep, Matt just touched on it, it's a very deep and complicated problem. And we need to solve it ourselves as much as we can. So it's about mental health. It's about getting back to basics in some ways, things that our grandparents told us with the kids. We need to apply all the latest learnings we have along with some of that old conventional wisdom from previous generations, which is go outside and play, get some sunshine, pray, meditate, do something creative, put the screens down, human connection. We have to teach kids that the artificial means of regulating their very real anxiety. This generation, because as Matt mentioned, starts every day with a higher baseline level of anxiety than any generation in history, and it's because they're being bombarded 24/7, 365 with metadata, and it amplifies everything. So we're going to have to balance that out, to swing the pendulum back the other way a little bit and teach young people that there are sustainable, organic, natural ways that you can make the same brain changes to your brain chemistry as these artificial drugs do. And actually, when you figure them out, they last a lifetime, where the artificial synthetic solution is temporary. And it works for a little while, and then it really doesn't work. So it's going to take a deep, deep cultural shift. A good friend of mine, a former DEA agent, says it's taken us 50 or 60 years to get into this mess. We might be at the front end of a 50-year effort to get out of it. But we got to start now. We got to start here at home, and we got to start with our young people and get them engaged in being part of the solution. That's where we come from.
Yeah. I didn't really have a closing statement prepared, but I'll thank everybody for allowing us this opportunity. One thing I want to hit home on is I don't believe there's a family out there that is exempt from this. It might not be your child, but I guarantee you somewhere in your family tree, whether it's an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a niece, a nephew, somebody in everybody's family tree has done drugs or is doing drugs. And in today's market, drug market, this new era of synthetic drugs, if you cannot guarantee your child, your son, daughter, granddaughter, again, nephew, niece, whoever it is, if you can't guarantee that they won't try one drug one time, you can't guarantee that they won't be a victim of fentanyl. And that's the reality we're facing these days. There's probably not a single person in this audience. Maybe you didn't do it yourself. I guarantee you there's people, probably most of the people in here at some point tried something at least one time. And if you didn't, you had friends that did. So the decisions are no different than those same decisions that we made when we were young. The difference is those decisions are costing you your life these days. And we need to get this message out there. And we need to hold those accountable who are selling this stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you both for an incredible evening. Are you willing to be part of the solution? Are you willing to go on this website, these websites? Are you willing to get stickers? Are you willing to speak up?
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.